The life of human beings and the life of books are intimately connected. Good poetry has the power to elevate and improve us, while poetry that is either soulless or carelessly written may injure us. And for this reason, good poetry is a means of grace. That is a direct encounter with the goodness which sustains the true, the good, and the beautiful in the world. It's the unquestioned grace of every breath of air, every sunbeam, every morning and evening, and the benefits of the ordered universe that sustain us with physical, spiritual, and moral nourishment. So assured are we often of these graces that we seldom call our attention to them. My name is Adam Walker, and welcome to my channel. I'm a longtime lover of poetry, and I hold a PhD in English and American Literature from Harvard University. I want to talk about why I have dedicated my life to the study of poetry and why I'll continue this calling, whether inside or outside the academy. This video outlines my teaching philosophy primarily for those interested in joining Versed Community, my online school of poetry. This video is on the landing page, but it also goes for much of what I do on YouTube and how I teach in the university. Hopefully it will give you a better idea of whether Versed Community would be a right place for you. And it also highlights something about the humanities that will never be taken away by AI: the necessity of companionship and community in education, especially literary education. Versed Community is built upon the idea that the trust of the humanities is not in the academy alone. The humanities are upheld by public readers, probably more so than the universities at this point. Helpful is Samuel Taylor Coleridge's idea of the clerisy. It was his idea of a public class of everyday educated people in whom the culture and learning of a nation is embodied. The health of a nation depends upon this class, Coleridge believed. It's a class which is not of academics or scholars alone or theologians, but of average readers, capable of advancing learning in all branches of knowledge. This idea was first advanced in Coleridge's On the Constitution of the Church and State in 1830. He believed that some members of the clerisy would reside inside the academy, but most of them would be living everyday lives outside of the universities. And I think that's partly what we're enriching on Versed Community. So let me talk about the value of literature on the whole. It's funny talking about literature. It's funny defending literature. Anyone knows the value of literature who has enjoyed a good story. And when pressed to justify the humanities, the professionals will often acknowledge the moral effect of literature, especially its capacity to facilitate empathy. But literature does more than simply make us more empathetic. And this is a valuable thing, but it does more. Literature provides a template for life and order for the human experience. It rouses our conscience and dilates our moral capacity. It furnishes a vocabulary for the motions of the inner life, and it sharpens our attention to the world. It wakes things up that are in us, and it often requires the concession of moral imperatives, those imaginative laws that hold together the moral worlds of poems and of novels. Literature expands our capacity to communicate, to problem solve within a democratic society, to celebrate, and to lament critically and communally. But there are mainly four values that I teach and live by, and these guide my work as a teacher and affirm what makes literary studies worthwhile. But those readers, students, and professionals with a commitment to literature must continue to strengthen the good things that remain. There are many good things passing away, and yet there are many good things that still remain. So the first value is a reverence for the human experience in all of its diversity. Learning to find meaning and beauty in a poem or a novel helps us to find meaning and beauty in our own lives. Walter Jackson Bate wrote that to pick one's way through the large, chaotic body of man's literature, evaluating and getting anything out of it, involves, first of all, the use of the same qualities of mind needed to extract any point or meaning from life itself. This indeed, as the Greeks saw it, is the great justification of the humanities. One of the functions of poetry is to organize the chaos of human experience into carefully ordered verbal events. And this organization occurs not only through the process of writing, but also through the process of the experience of reading, the interpreting and the evaluating that goes into reading literature, since literature helps us to organize and understand our own experience. This reverent attention to the language arts has historically been the bedrock of literary study, and it's what I think will always remain. The second value is a love for language. The literary profession, unlike history or any of the other arts and sciences, is that its engagement exists in the same medium as its subject, and that's language itself. This is something Christopher Ricks makes note of. And a respect for language should be taught and modeled by the literary profession. Helen Vendler wrote that students need to love not just Shakespeare's characters, but Shakespeare's language, not just Keats's sentiments, but Keats's English. And literary studies should enjoy the language in which ideas are clothed, and ideally, this attention to language will enable students to care for their own language. And this is why, when I teach, I emphasize attention to the language arts. And I've seen this have a positive effect on students' writing. The more students cultivate this respect for language and start noticing it in other writers, the faster they are to learn how to communicate clearly and honestly on their own. They are less likely to hide underdeveloped thoughts in confusing language as they learn to leverage tone, balance ideas, and to establish trust with the reader or listener through sincerity and art. Respect for language seeks to explore the characteristics of not just ideas, but the language through which those ideas are communicated. For this reason, close reading has always been central to my practice here on YouTube, in the university, and on Versed Community where I'm teaching now. But what is close reading, other than the deliberate channeling of one's attention? And I found that literature is most successfully taught when students learn to read with an enjoyment of and attention to the shape of sound and meaning. Such attention can broaden students' sympathies and provide models of clear communication and artistry, models which students can make new in their own endeavors, not just in school, but also in future careers and whatever they do. So whether close reading examples of public rhetoric, such as Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, or analyzing the development of character in Shakespeare's plays, such as Leontes' repentance in the final act of The Winter's Tale, that's something we've done recently on Versed. My methods aim to cultivate the conditions under which a love and an appreciation of literature might take hold and deepen. Now, the third value is a commitment to community, which affirms the value of diversity and dialogue and promotes a culture of academic excellence and enriches individual reading as a communal experience. It involves individual growth that is outward-facing and shaped by the communal experience that inhabits literature, the record of experience written by men and women, many of whom have lived in ages and countries far different than our own. C.S. Lewis, in his An Experiment in Criticism, spoke of literary experience this way: literary experience heals the wound without undermining the privilege of individuality. There are mass emotions which heal the wound, but they destroy the privilege. In reading great literature, I become 1,000 men and yet remain myself. Like the night sky in the Greek poem, I see with a myriad of eyes, but it is still I who see. Here, as in worship, in love, in moral action, and in knowing, I transcend myself, and am never more myself than when I do. This commitment to community recognizes that reading well involves a communal exercise. It's expanding one's capacity to see and to move and to care for things beyond oneself, and it recognizes that professing literature involves entering into a conversation that has been going on for centuries. It allows readers to widen their sympathies beyond themselves into the broader world and to imagine and aim for collective goals, and it enables readers to participate in a search for wisdom to which individuals for centuries have collectively committed themselves. Many of my lectures on Versed are interactive, or at least have the opportunities for those present to engage with the material after lecture and in discussion. So many of my courses have a seminar component, which meets a day or two after the lecture is posted, when we can have a 90-minute guided discussion, where we discuss questions that members raised in the course chat room and on the forums, or fora, if you want to be technically correct. I usually come with a few discussion questions of my own to these meetings, tailored to the course goal, but this is really where the magic happens, where readers are able to bring their own concerns to the reading and discuss it together. And that's why community is such a value, and this is the main thing that AI cannot take away from the humanities. Now, my fourth value is the duty to public service for the greater good. The principle of duty imagines a profession of literature as public-facing, consciously holding a reverence for the past, for the future, and for ongoing writing. In his book, The Committed Word, James Engell wrote that each generation, each individual, needs again to be led out of the world to discover in the world what has already been imagined into reality, and then to imagine more. Literary studies can promote reflection on the nature of virtue, the foundation of any good government and any successful and just society. As the diverse written record of human experience, literature invites, often demands, a plurality of consideration and perspective. I often teach students from different backgrounds and identities, and I found that the pursuit of virtue and truth is always enriched through a diversity of perspectives when students leverage their classmates' insights and when they share what they know and what other students, and often I, do not know. Some of the best conversations on verse have happened when students feel that their perspectives are integral toward the pursuit of truth, because they are, even if it means challenging my own assumptions. The Romans had a sense of pietas as a kind of kindred love and duty. The scene that comes to mind is from Virgil's Aeneid, when Aeneas is describing how he fled the burning city of Troy, and as he escaped, he has Priam's sword, but he also carries his aged father on his back and leads his young son at his side. And this, to me, is the picture of literary profession. It bears the burden of the past and moves forward to benefit posterity. And this is something we all participate in as readers, no matter whether you're in the academy or not. And this principle of public duty recognizes that literature should be centered on public life. There really shouldn't be a separate category of what the Academy now calls public humanities. The study of literature, teaching, writing, reading, is intrinsically public. These are the values that are guiding my work at Versed Community. It's a small way to fight back in an age increasingly mediated by algorithm and automation and efficiency. And a reminder that poetry and the humanities are a means of grace, a form of intellectual and moral sustenance that cannot be replicated by AI and must continue to be fought for. So I hope this gives you a little bit more insight into what I do, especially in my online teaching. For everyone who finished the video and watched all the way to the end, thanks for watching, and until next time.